I got arrested for trespassing in my own backyard because I watered flowers 2 minutes past deadline. She had no idea who she was messing with. 6:47 a.m. I'm standing there in my bathrobe, coffee steaming, watching sprinklers hit my petunias. 2 minutes past their insane watering window. That's when Cordelia lost her mind and called the cops. He's criminally trespassing during restricted irrigation hours. 3 patrol cars, sirens wailing, neighbors peeking out like I'm running a cartel, the sweet smell of wet flowers mixing with diesel exhaust and bureaucratic insanity. Sir, you're under arrest for criminal trespassing. Handcuffs clicking shut while I'm thinking, lady, you have absolutely no clue what you just started. I'm Judge Bartholomew Sterling. And this little stunt of yours? It's about to backfire in ways you can't even imagine. Stick around because what happens next will blow your mind. What would you do? Drop your location. I need these crazy HOA stories. Let me back up and tell you how a retired judge ended up in handcuffs for watering flowers. I'm Bartholomew Sterling, Bart to friends. And after 30 years sentencing actual criminals, I thought retirement meant sleeping past sunrise and growing tomatoes without anyone timing my irrigation schedule with a stopwatch. My wife Miriam and I bought our dream home in Willowbrook Estates 6 months ago. Picture-perfect ranch house, manicured lawns, the kind of neighborhood where kids still ride bikes and neighbors wave from their porches. The smell of fresh mulch and new beginnings filled the air during our first week. I'd casually mentioned my background to a few neighbors over welcome casseroles and morning coffee. Most were thrilled. A real judge lives here now, Mrs. Penelope from next door had said, her weathered hands warm in mine. Finally, someone who understands justice. If only I'd known what was coming. Enter Cordelia Ashworth. Think of every power-drunk middle manager you've ever met, except she's elected herself dictator of a suburban neighborhood. Blonde hair shellacked into place, nails sharp enough to perform surgery, and a smile so fake it could be Exhibit A in a fraud trial. She lives in the corner mansion, naturally, and runs her real estate empire from a home office that overlooks half the street like a watchtower. Day 3 of retirement bliss. The click, click, click of designer heels on my driveway announces trouble. Cordelia appears with a clipboard thick as a phone book and violation notices already printed with my address. "Welcome to Willowbrook," she chirps, thrusting papers at me. The overwhelming cloud of floral perfume that follows her could choke a horse. Just a few tiny violations to address immediately. Violations. On day 3. My crime? Planting tomatoes in my backyard. Actual food, growing in actual soil, on property I actually own. But according to Cordelia's twisted interpretation of the HOA covenant, only approved decorative plants were permitted in areas visible from community access points. Page 37 clearly prohibits unauthorized botanical installations, she explains, pointing to microscopic text buried deeper than Jimmy Hoffa. I tried reasoning, showed her section 4.2b about homeowner garden maintenance rights, explained my tomatoes were barely visible unless you climbed a ladder and used binoculars. "I've been interpreting these rules for 8 years, judge or not," she snapped, saying judge like it was a communicable disease. Red flag number 1. Anyone who dismisses 3 decades of legal experience while wielding a clipboard has clearly never faced real authority. But I played nice. Ripped out my tomatoes, planted approved shrubs that cost triple and attracted 0 hummingbirds. Figured I'd keep the peace, be the good neighbor, pick my battles wisely. That's when the whispers started. Mrs. Penelope approached me at my mailbox, glancing around like she was passing state secrets. "Judge Sterling, can I tell you something terrible? 2 years of living in terror. $500 in fines for Christmas lights installed 8 hours too early. December 14th instead of December 15th. 300 more for her granddaughter's sidewalk chalk art deemed unsightly temporary graffiti. The young Henderson family across the street got violations for their kids' bicycle training wheels visible through their garage window. Apparently, if you stood on your tiptoes and squinted just right, you could see them from the street. We're thinking of moving, Sarah Henderson whispered to me later, her voice shaking. Our children are afraid to play outside. They call her the mean clipboard lady and hide when she walks by. That's when the picture became crystal clear. Cordelia wasn't running an HOA. She was operating a protection racket with legal letterhead. Every conversation revealed another family terrorized by arbitrary rules, impossible deadlines, and fines that multiplied like rabbits. Elderly Mr. Kowalski got dinged for his newspaper being delivered improperly. Apparently, it landed 6 inches outside the approved newspaper placement zone. The Wilson family faced violations for their dog barking excessively during a thunderstorm. But here's what really got my attention. Every targeted family shared certain characteristics: non-European surnames, rental properties, young families, anyone who looked different or lacked the time and resources to fight back. Cordelia had turned Willowbrook Estates into her personal fiefdom, using HOA rules as weapons against anyone who didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. She'd just picked the wrong neighborhood to terrorize. Because while she was busy playing dictator with a clipboard, she'd moved next door to someone who spent 30 years studying exactly how small-time tyrants operate and exactly how to bring them down. The irrigation violation notice appeared on my door like a death warrant written in red ink. Criminal water theft, $200 fine immediately due. Criminal water theft for watering my own petunias. According to Cordelia's latest masterpiece of bureaucratic insanity, I'd been running sprinklers until 6:47 a.m., 2 minutes past the HOA's sacred irrigation deadline. Problem was, my timer shut off at exactly 6:45 a.m. I'd programmed it myself and checked it obsessively. That's when I realized this woman had been conducting surveillance on my morning routine like I was running a cartel operation. Every day at 6:43 a.m. sharp, Cordelia would materialize on her fitness walk, positioning herself across the street with military precision. Clipboard ready, stopwatch gleaming, studying my sprinkler system like she was planning a heist. The crisp morning air carried the rhythmic click-click-click of her designer heels against pavement, the sound of crazy marching in formation. Time to flip the script. I installed a professional-grade timestamp camera aimed directly at my sprinkler control panel. If Princess Clipboard wanted to play precision timing games, I'd give her accuracy that would make NASA jealous. The soft mechanical whir of the camera's autofocus became my new favorite sound, like justice clearing its throat. What I discovered was pure comedic gold wrapped in criminal stupidity. My sprinklers shut off at exactly 6 hours, 45 minutes, and 0 seconds a.m. every single morning. But guess what? Cordelia's expensive designer watch was running 3 minutes fast. She'd been documenting violations that existed only in her warped timeline, creating fictional crimes from thin air. But wait, it gets better. While I was gathering evidence of my own innocence, my camera caught something else. Whose sprinklers ran until 6:52 a.m. every morning? Whose husband power washed the driveway during restricted hours every Saturday? Whose pool maintenance guy operated loud equipment at 7:30 a.m. on Sundays? That's right. The HOA president herself was violating every rule she'd been terrorizing the neighborhood with. This reminded me of a discrimination case I'd presided over years ago, a landlord who only enforced lease violations against minority tenants while ignoring identical violations by white renters. The pattern of selective enforcement had been the smoking gun that proved bias and invalidated his entire eviction system. What Cordelia was doing followed the exact same playbook, and I knew from experience that this kind of evidence could bring down her whole operation. I compiled 3 weeks of crystal clear evidence and made a decision that would have horrified my wife. I invited Cordelia over for coffee. She arrived like she was conducting a military inspection, that overwhelming floral perfume announcing her presence before she even knocked. The scent was so strong it made my eyes water, desperation masked by department store fragrance. "I have photographic evidence of your violations," I said calmly, spreading the time-stamped photos across my kitchen table like a poker player revealing a royal flush. Her perfectly composed face went through more changes than a slot machine hitting jackpot. Confusion, recognition, panic, then raw fury. "These photos are illegal surveillance," she shrieked, her voice hitting frequencies that probably disturbed dogs 3 blocks away. "Taken from public sidewalks of activities visible to anyone walking by," I replied, sipping coffee that suddenly tasted like victory mixed with morning sunshine. "Exactly the same surveillance you've been conducting on my property." That's when she made the tactical error that would define her downfall. Instead of backing down, apologizing, or even just leaving with whatever dignity remained, Cordelia chose the nuclear option. "This is criminal harassment. You're trespassing on irrigation schedules and stalking HOA officials." I paused mid-sip. Trespassing on irrigation schedules. In 30 years of hearing creative legal theories from desperate defendants, I'd never encountered someone claiming you could commit trespassing against a time period. It was like accusing someone of burglary against a calendar or assault against a stopwatch. Before I could explain basic concepts like property rights and temporal physics, she was already speed dialing 911, her manicured fingers attacking the numbers like she was trying to stab them to death. "I need police immediately. Criminal trespassing and harassment of HOA officials." Here's where it became beautiful. She wasn't just filing a false police report, she was doing it on my timestamp camera system. Every fraudulent word was being recorded in perfect, high-definition color. "Ma'am, what's the nature of the trespassing?" came the dispatcher's confused voice through her phone. "He's using water during prohibited irrigation times. That's theft of community resources." Long pause. I could practically hear the dispatcher's brain trying to process how someone trespasses on their own watering schedule. "Ma'am, is the person on someone else's property?" "No, he's on his own property, but he's violating water usage schedules." Another pause. "Irrigation disputes are civil matters, ma'am. We don't arrest people for watering their gardens." Cordelia's voice reached a pitch that could shatter crystal and probably registered on seismic equipment in neighboring counties. "This is criminal. I'm the HOA president. I know what constitutes crimes. We'll send an officer to assess the situation." She slammed my kitchen phone down so hard my coffee cup jumped. Her nails scraped against my wooden table like claws on a chalkboard, leaving actual scratches in the finish. "You think being a judge makes you untouchable?" she hissed. "I've controlled this neighborhood for 8 years. I have real connections, real authority." The gravel crunching in my driveway announced the patrol car's arrival. Through my window, I recognized Officer Martinez, someone I'd sworn in as detective just 2 years earlier. Cordelia straightened her blazer like she was preparing for battle. "Now you'll see what real authority looks like." I smiled and took another sip of coffee. She had no idea she was about to become the star of her own arrest video. 2 weeks later, Cordelia struck with surgical precision. My daughter Jessica had come home for the weekend, bringing her boyfriend Marcus to meet us. They parked in the guest spot Friday at 7 p.m., planning to leave Sunday after brunch. Saturday morning, 8:20 a.m. sharp, another red violation notice slapped on my door like a declaration of war. Excess guest parking, 25-hour violation, $150 immediate fine, 25 hours. This psycho was now timing parking down to individual minutes, claiming the 24-hour rule meant midnight to midnight, not rolling periods. The morning air smelled like jasmine and impending legal warfare as I read this bureaucratic masterpiece. But here's what made my blood boil. While she was measuring my daughter's parking with atomic precision, Cordelia's mother-in-law's Buick had been squatting in her driveway for 6 straight days. Time for some detective work. I drove to the county recorder's office and pulled the original HOA covenant, the actual legal document, not Cordelia's fantasy interpretation manual. Section 7. 3C, clear as crystal. Guest parking permitted for periods up to 48 consecutive hours. 48 hours. She'd been cutting the legal limit in half and stealing money based on fictional timelines. This reminded me of a rental scam case I'd handled. A landlord who interpreted lease terms to justify bogus fees until tenants brought the original contracts to court. Same criminal playbook, different address. But while I was building my case, Cordelia was preparing her nuclear option. Monday brought a violation blitz that made D-Day look subtle. The Henderson family got dinged because their son's bicycle was visible through garage window during unauthorized storage. Mrs. Penelope faced a fine for her granddaughter's chalk art exceeding the 4-hour temporary decoration limit. Elderly Mr. Kowalski got cited because his newspaper landed outside approved delivery coordinates. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Every single violation targeted families with non-European surnames, renters, or households with children. Meanwhile, Cordelia's cronies violated rules with impunity. Then came the mini twist that changed everything. Thursday evening, my doorbell rang. Sarah Henderson stood there shaking, clutching a violation notice that made the others look reasonable. "Judge Sterling," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's threatening to call Child Protective Services." The violation claimed their children's toys visible through windows constituted hazardous household conditions and improper child supervision. Cordelia was weaponizing CPS against a family whose only crime was having kids. That's when I realized this wasn't just HOA harassment. It was systematic persecution with government agencies as weapons. She said if we don't pay all outstanding fines immediately, she'll report us for child endangerment, Sarah sobbed. "We can't afford it. We're talking about selling the house." The metallic taste of pure rage filled my mouth. Using false CPS reports to terrorize families crossed every legal and moral line imaginable. I called an emergency meeting with the other 2 board members that night. What I discovered made my judicial blood run cold. Board member #1, Frank Morrison, a quiet accountant. "Judge Sterling, we never voted on half these violation interpretations. Cordelia just declares them." Board member #2, Linda Park, a school teacher. She threatened to report Frank's business for operating from residential property when he tried to question her. I'm terrified she'll target my teaching license. Cordelia had been blackmailing the entire board into submission while operating a one-woman dictatorship disguised as community governance. The smell of fear and desperation hung in the air like smoke as these two decent people described months of intimidation. But they were ready to fight back if someone could protect them from retaliation. Friday night's emergency HOA meeting felt like a showdown at high noon. Cordelia sat at the head table radiating fake authority while nervous residents packed folding chairs that squeaked against the linoleum floor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. "We're here to address the pattern of community disruption," Cordelia announced, her voice echoing off cinderblock walls. "Certain residents think rules don't apply to them." She was staring directly at me, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. I stood slowly, manila folder in hand. "Before we discuss violations, let's review what the actual rules say." I'd brought copies of the original covenant for everyone. The collective gasp when residents saw the real 48-hour parking rule was like air being sucked from the room. "You've been stealing money with fake interpretations," I said calmly. Cordelia's face went from confident to panicked in 2 seconds flat. "Those are outdated documents. I have authority to update interpretations. Show me that authority in writing." Silence, the kind that screams louder than arguments. "You can't," I continued, "because it doesn't exist." That's when Cordelia made the desperate move that would seal her fate forever. Instead of backing down, she doubled down with the legal equivalent of a suicide bomb. "I'm calling the police to have you arrested for harassment and intimidation." She pulled out her phone right there, in front of 60 witnesses, and dialed 911 to file another false report. Some people never learn. Lucky for me. The week after that board meeting, Cordelia declared total war. I was in my backyard Wednesday morning, photographing my sprinkler timer for daily documentation, when the cavalry arrived. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing, radios crackling like a drug bust was going down. Officer Martinez stepped out looking like he'd rather be investigating actual crimes. "Judge Sterling, we got a report of stalking and criminal harassment." The complaint? I was allegedly conducting surveillance operations against HOA officials and intimidating community leaders during their constitutional right to peaceful walks. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. Cordelia had been photographing my house every morning for a month, but somehow I was the stalker. "Let me show you something, officer." I pulled up my security footage. There was Princess Clipboard, clear as HD television, positioned across the street at exactly 6:43 a.m. daily, documenting my every move like I was under FBI investigation. Martinez watched the footage with the expression of a man slowly losing faith in humanity. "So she's been taking pictures of your house, but she's claiming you're stalking her?" "4th complaint this month," his partner Officer Torres muttered. "All from the same address. All about irrigation schedules and neighborhood harassment." I could see the realization dawning in their eyes. They were being used as Cordelia's personal enforcement squad. But that was just the appetizer. The main course of crazy arrived Thursday afternoon. Mrs. Penelope appeared at my door pale as printer paper, her weathered hands shaking like autumn leaves. "Judge Sterling, that woman came with immigration officers. They want to deport me." My blood pressure spiked into orbit. Immigration officers? She told them I run a legal business because granddaughter sells lemonade sometimes. They demanded citizenship papers, threatened to investigate whole family. The metallic taste of pure rage filled my mouth. Cordelia had weaponized federal immigration enforcement against an elderly naturalized citizen whose granddaughter occasionally sold lemonade for quarters. "Mrs. Penelope, did you see official identification, government vehicles?" "No official car, regular sedan, but man seemed very serious, very scary." Something stank worse than garbage in August heat. Real federal agents don't investigate lemonade stands, and they definitely don't arrive in unmarked personal vehicles based on HOA complaints. I made some calls to contacts in federal law enforcement. What I discovered sent chills down my spine. No immigration investigation existed. No federal interest in Mrs. Penelope whatsoever. Cordelia had hired actors to impersonate federal agents and terrorize an immigrant family. That's conspiracy to impersonate federal officers, a felony that makes tax evasion look like jaywalking. But Friday brought the crown jewel of Cordelia's criminal stupidity. The certified letter arrived looking official enough to fool most people. Willowbrook Estates Legal Department in gold foil across letterhead that probably cost more than my monthly water bill. Inside, a cease and desist order demanding I stop illegal surveillance activities and systematic harassment of duly elected community officials. The letter threatened immediate criminal prosecution and civil damages exceeding $75,000 if I didn't comply within 24 hours. Here's the beautiful part. Willowbrook Estates didn't have a legal department. The return address traced to a UPS mailbox, and the attorney who signed it was about as real as unicorns. But impersonating a lawyer and sending fraudulent legal threats? That's multiple felonies gift-wrapped with a bow. Then came the mini twist that changed everything. My phone rang at 9 p.m. Officer Martinez's voice carried exhaustion mixed with barely controlled anger. "Judge Sterling, we need to talk. Unofficially, can you meet me tomorrow morning? Saturday, 7 a.m., corner booth at Danny's Diner." The smell of bacon grease and institutional coffee filled the air as Martinez slid a manila folder across the Formica table. "She's filed 12 complaints in 3 weeks," he said, opening the folder like it contained radioactive material. "Trespassing, stalking, harassment, intimidation, destruction of property, disturbing the peace, illegal surveillance, and something called conspiracy to undermine community governance." Conspiracy to undermine community governance? Yeah, I made the same face. But here's where it gets interesting. He pulled out another document. "We ran a full background check. Your HOA president isn't just crazy, she's connected." The report showed Cordelia's business partnerships with a private investigation firm, a debt collection agency, and something called Community Compliance Solutions, a company that specialized in HOA enforcement and resident intimidation. "Judge, I think you're dealing with professional fraud, not just neighborhood politics. She's been running a systematic harassment operation using multiple shell companies." That's when the real bombshell dropped. "We also discovered she's not the legitimate HOA president. The incorporation papers expired 18 months ago. Legally, she has zero authority to enforce anything." The pieces clicked together like a puzzle solving itself. Cordelia hadn't just been abusing HOA power. She'd been operating a completely fraudulent organization while collecting thousands in illegal fees. I sat back in the vinyl booth, sipping coffee that suddenly tasted like victory mixed with vindication. "Officer Martinez, I think it's time we discussed arrest warrants." That conversation with Officer Martinez hit me like a lightning bolt to the brain. If the HOA incorporation had expired, every single thing Cordelia had been doing wasn't just wrong, it was criminal fraud. I raced home and fired up my laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard like a pianist on Red Bull. The State Business Registry search results made my coffee mug slip from my hands and crash to the floor. Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association dissolved. Failure to file annual report. Dissolution date, March 15th, 2 years ago. 2 fucking years. Cordelia had been running a fake organization longer than some people stay married. Every violation, every fine, every threat, all of it was criminal impersonation of authority. The room started spinning as the implications hit me. My hands were literally shaking as I printed the official dissolution documents. This wasn't HOA overreach. This was organized theft with a legal costume. But wait, it gets so much worse. I dove into the financial records like a forensic accountant on a mission from God. Every administrative fee Cordelia had collected, every bogus fine she'd imposed, all criminal fraud. A dissolved corporation has zero authority to do anything except exist as a really expensive paperweight. Then I found the county recorder's lien filings. 17 fraudulent liens against neighborhood properties. 17 families trapped in their homes by fake legal documents filed by a non-existent organization. The scope was mind-blowing. Cordelia had basically been running a neighborhood protection racket while wearing a fake badge. I pulled up those shell companies Martinez had mentioned. Holy shit. Community Compliance Solutions had been billing the HOA $3,000 monthly for enforcement services, with Cordelia controlling both accounts. She was literally paying herself to terrorize neighbors with their own money. The private investigation firm? Same ownership. The debt collection agency? Same network. She'd built an entire ecosystem of fake businesses to legitimize her fraud operation. The bitter smell of my overheated laptop mixed with the taste of pure outrage in my mouth. This woman hadn't just been power-hungry. She'd been running a criminal enterprise that would make the mafia proud. But here's the beautiful irony. Her desperate escalation had handed me evidence of federal crimes, impersonating federal agents, filing false police reports, operating dissolved corporations for profit, and, my personal favorite, conspiracy to defraud elderly residents. Every morning I'd watched her march around with that clipboard. She'd been committing felonies. Every violation notice was criminal fraud. Every threatening phone call was extortion by someone with zero legal authority. I started laughing, actually laughing out loud in my empty kitchen. Cordelia had been so busy playing dictator that she'd forgotten to check if her dictatorship actually existed. This was like discovering the emperor has no clothes, except the emperor had also been robbing people while naked and claiming divine authority to do it. I grabbed my phone and called District Attorney Patricia Wolf, my voice probably vibrating with excitement. Pat, I need to report the most beautiful case of organized fraud you've ever seen. How beautiful are we talking, Bart? I scrolled through the evidence one more time, my grin growing wider. A fake HOA president who's been running a dissolved corporation for 2 years, collecting fraudulent fees, filing bogus liens, and threatening residents with non-existent authority. Conservative estimate, $147,000 in theft, plus property damage affecting 17 families. Dead silence. Then, are you absolutely certain about the dissolution? I'm holding the state documents. This organization has been legally dead longer than some reality TV shows. Jesus Christ. How fast can you get here? As I loaded documents into my briefcase, the same one I'd retired 6 months ago, one final realization hit me like a champagne cork to the forehead. Every time Cordelia had called police about my violations, she'd been filing false reports while impersonating a government official. She'd been committing multiple felonies just to hassle me about watering flowers. The woman had built her own legal gallows and handed me the rope. Time to spring the trap. The DA's office that Saturday morning felt like the nerve center of a revolution. Patricia Wolf spread my evidence across her conference table like a general planning the siege of a corrupt kingdom, her coffee growing cold as she absorbed the beautiful scope of Cordelia's downfall. Holy shit, Bart, she breathed, holding up the state dissolution documents. She's been running a ghost organization for 2 years. This is criminal fraud wrapped in suburban respectability. We mapped out charges like kids planning Christmas morning, wire fraud for electronic theft, mail fraud for postal violations, filing false instruments for bogus liens, conspiracy to defraud elderly residents, and my personal favorite, impersonating a government official every time she'd weaponized police against imaginary crimes. Federal charges alone could bury her for 20 years, Pat said, her pen scratching notes with the intensity of someone writing death sentences. But I want to coordinate maximum impact, full court press. First mission, freeze her money before she could disappear to Costa Rica. Pat filed emergency asset seizure orders faster than Cordelia could say administrative fees. Every shell company account, every fraudulent collection, locked down tight. But here's where it got fun. Victim coordination turned into a neighborhood uprising. My phone buzzed constantly as word spread through Willowbrook Estates like gossip at a church picnic. Mrs. Penelope arrived Monday evening carrying a shoebox that looked like it contained state secrets. I kept everything, she said, spreading 2 years of violation notices across my kitchen table. Something felt wrong from beginning. In my country, we document suspicious authority. The papers told a story of systematic theft disguised as community service. $2,847 in payments to an organization that legally died before her granddaughter was born. The smell of jasmine tea mixed with righteous anger as Mrs. Penelope realized she'd been scammed by a suburban con artist. Tuesday brought the Henderson family, Sarah clutching evidence like sacred relics. 17 violations totaling $1,200 for the crime of having children who own toys and bicycles. My kids hide when they see her coming, Sarah whispered, tears making the violation notices blur. My 8-year-old asked if we're going to prison because our garage looks messy. By Wednesday, my dining room resembled a forensic accountant's fever dream. Spreadsheets tracking every fraudulent transaction, timeline charts showing ethnic targeting patterns, and witness statements that painted Cordelia as a predator with a clipboard. The smoking gun came from Frank Morrison, the terrorized board member who'd been keeping secret records like a resistance fighter. She threatened to destroy my accounting business if I questioned her interpretations, he admitted, his precisely organized documentation proving years of illegal board manipulation. I was paralyzed by fear of financial ruin. But the technical strategy was where things got delicious. We'd carpet bomb every regulatory agency with jurisdiction, State Attorney General for consumer fraud, Federal Trade Commission for deceptive practices, Department of Housing for discrimination, IRS for unreported criminal income. The media coordination made my retired prosecutor heart sing. Pat introduced me to investigative reporter Sarah Kim, whose eyes lit up like slot machines hitting jackpot. Elderly victims, fake authority, suburban corruption, and a retired judge's revenge? Sarah practically purred. This is Emmy-nominated television gold. When do we roll cameras? Perfect timing required surgical precision. Arrests coordinated with maximum media exposure to warn other communities about HOA fraud. Nothing motivates reform like perp walks on primetime news. I spent Thursday creating the Citizen's Guide to HOA Fraud Detection. Simple steps any homeowner could follow. Check state business registry for current incorporation. Demand annual financial reports. Verify board election procedures. If your HOA can't provide documentation, you're being scammed. The neighborhood canvass continued like a door-to-door revival meeting. The elderly Polish couple from Oak Street brought evidence of $900 in architectural violations for painting their door the wrong shade of blue. She made us apply 3 times for color approval, Mr. Kowalski explained, his accent thick with outrage. Each application cost $50. Each rejection came with additional fines. Friday's final evidence delivery made everything click into place. Linda Park, the terrified teacher, arrived with recordings that would make prosecutors weep with joy. I recorded her threatening phone calls, Linda whispered, producing a device that looked like spy equipment. She actually laughed about the expired incorporation, said residents were too stupid to check legal status. Those recordings captured Cordelia admitting criminal fraud while mocking her victims. Pure prosecutorial gold, gift-wrapped with her own arrogance. The final tally was staggering. $89,000 stolen from 43 families over 2 years. Systematic targeting of immigrants, elderly residents, and young families. A criminal enterprise disguised as community governance. Saturday morning brought the call I'd been waiting for. Pat's voice vibrated with excitement. Grand jury indictment approved. 12 felony counts. Federal prosecutors adding RICO charges for organized fraud. Arrest warrant signed and ready. When do we spring the trap? Monday morning. Right before that HOA meeting you've been promoting to the neighborhood. The irony was perfect. Cordelia's final performance as fake HOA president would be interrupted by real law enforcement with actual authority. I hung up the phone and smiled. After 30 years of watching justice work slowly, this felt like Christmas morning wrapped in legal vindication. The week before our planned takedown, Cordelia transformed from neighborhood dictator into full-blown criminal mastermind. Like a rabid animal backed into a corner, she became more vicious and infinitely more stupid with each passing hour. Monday morning's surprise nearly made me choke on my coffee. Anonymous flyers littered every doorstep like propaganda from a banana republic. Protect your community from judicial corruption, screamed across the top in blood-red letters. The flyers claimed I was using retired judge privileges to terrorize legitimate community governance and destroy property values through frivolous legal warfare. They urged residents to report any contact from me to a community safety hotline. I dialed the number out of curiosity. Cordelia's voice answered, "Willowbrook Protection Services, how can we help you stay safe?" She'd created a fake crisis hotline to turn my neighbors into informants. The woman was operating her own suburban Stasi network. Tuesday's escalation made the flyers look like love notes. I woke up to find my security cameras murdered, lenses spray-painted black, cables cut with surgical precision. The acrid smell of fresh paint mixed with morning dew created an industrial stench that made my nose burn. Within 2 hours, a violation notice appeared like magic. Malfunctioning security equipment, $500 immediate fine. The breathtaking audacity was almost admirable. She'd vandalized my cameras, then fined me for having vandalized cameras. But my hidden backup system had recorded her husband creeping around my property at 3:17 a.m. with wire cutters and spray paint. That's destruction of evidence, criminal conspiracy, and trespass. Cordelia was collecting felonies like Pokemon cards. Wednesday brought nuclear-level desperation. A process server delivered what looked like an official restraining order. Fake court letterhead, fictional case number, forged signatures. The document ordered me to cease harassment activities and maintain 500-foot distance from HOA officials. One tiny problem: the issuing judge had been dead for 3 years. I called Pat immediately. She's forging court documents using deceased judges' names. Sweet Jesus, Bart, she's committing federal crimes faster than we can type the warrants. But Thursday evening delivered the mini twist that sealed her fate. Frank Morrison appeared at my door pale as printer paper, clutching a manila envelope like it contained radioactive material. "Judge Sterling, she tried to buy me," he whispered, his voice shaking like autumn leaves. $5,000 cash to sign a sworn statement accusing you of criminal threats. Inside, a pre-written affidavit claiming I'd been intimidating board members, tampering with witnesses, and conspiring to destroy community stability. Complete fiction, but notarized and ready for court filing. She said if I refused, she'd report my wife's home daycare for unlicensed operation, Frank continued, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. She has photos of neighborhood kids in our backyard, claims it's evidence of commercial child endangerment, attempted witness bribery, extortion using family threats, manufacturing false evidence. Cordelia was building her own legal gallows, one crime at a time. Friday brought the masterpiece of criminal stupidity that proved she'd completely divorced reality. At 6 a.m. sharp, a black SUV with movie villain tinted windows parked across from my house. Two men in bargain basement suits sat inside conducting the world's most obvious surveillance operation. They pointed cameras at my windows like paparazzi stalking celebrities, completely oblivious to how ridiculous they looked. When I approached with my phone recording, they peeled out like bank robbers fleeing a heist, but not before I captured their license plate and crystal clear facial shots. The plate traced to Metropolitan Investigation Solutions, another Cordelia shell company. She was now running surveillance operations against a retired judge who was actively cooperating with federal prosecutors. The level of stupidity was approaching theoretical physics. That afternoon came her final act of desperation masquerading as authority. A certified letter from Willowbrook Estates Emergency Security Division demanded my appearance for a mandatory resident safety evaluation, or face immediate community removal proceedings. The letter claimed multiple residents felt physically threatened and psychologically intimidated by my systematic campaign of judicial harassment against elected community representatives. The interview was scheduled for Monday morning at 9 a.m., exactly when federal agents planned to arrest her. The cosmic irony was perfect. While Cordelia prepared to ambush me with fake security theater, real federal marshals were preparing to ambush her with genuine handcuffs. I called Pat with the week's criminal highlights. She's completely unhinged, I reported. Property destruction, document forgery, witness bribery, illegal surveillance, and now fake security tribunals. Absolutely beautiful, Pat purred with prosecutorial ecstasy. Every crime adds years to her sentence. She's gift-wrapping her own conviction. Ready for Monday's grand finale? Federal task force assembled, media positioned for maximum coverage. Arrest warrants signed in triplicate. Judge Sterling, this will be the most satisfying Monday morning in law enforcement history. The smell of Cordelia's desperation hung in the evening air like smoke from a dumpster fire. She'd evolved from clipboard tyrant to criminal mastermind in her own delusional universe. Monday would introduce her to actual reality with the gentle touch of federal restraints. The weekend before Monday's showdown, Cordelia transformed into a suburban Shakespearean villain, equal parts dangerous and utterly delusional. Saturday morning brought her Hail Mary media play. She'd contacted Channel 12 with an exclusive tip about judicial corruption, claiming a retired judge was weaponizing courthouse connections to terrorize innocent community leaders. The reporter did something Cordelia hadn't expected: actual journalism. One phone call to the DA's office revealed I was the star witness in an ongoing federal fraud investigation. The story flipped faster than a pancake. Suburban HOA president under federal investigation for systematic fraud. Cordelia's reputation assassination attempt had backfired so spectacularly it probably showed up on NASA satellites, but Sunday delivered her magnum opus of criminal theater. Emergency community safety meeting, mandatory attendance, screamed from expensive flyers that appeared on every door by noon. The cardstock was so thick it could stop bullets, and the fake governmental seals looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd never seen actual government documents. The meeting claimed multiple families reported feeling physically terrorized by my systematic campaign of judicial intimidation and surveillance warfare. The beautiful irony? While Cordelia manufactured fake emergencies about me, actual federal agents were conducting real surveillance on her criminal enterprise. I couldn't resist attending this theatrical masterpiece. For pure entertainment value, it promised to beat anything on Netflix. The community center that evening felt like a cross between a cult meeting and a war crimes tribunal. Folding chairs arranged in perfect military rows, a podium that looked suspiciously like stolen courtroom furniture, and lighting dramatic enough to film a horror movie. Cordelia had recruited expert witnesses, 3 people in polyester suits who looked like they'd been hired from a community theater's reject pile. The smell of cheap cologne mixed with nervous sweat created an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a knife. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cordelia began, her voice echoing off cinderblock walls with the authority of someone channeling Mussolini, We face an unprecedented assault on our community's safety and democratic governance. The presentation was pure propaganda art, professional slides showing my house from every angle, photos of my security cameras labeled illegal surveillance apparatus, pictures of me talking to neighbors titled systematic intimidation activities. The beautiful part? My hidden backup cameras were recording her entire performance in courtroom quality HD. This individual has weaponized his former judicial position to conduct psychological warfare against legitimate community leadership, she announced, pointing at blown-up photos like a prosecutor presenting murder evidence. Her 3 experts delivered testimonials that would have made conspiracy theorists proud. My behavior patterns indicated sociopathic tendencies and escalating potential for community violence. Every ridiculous word was being preserved for federal prosecutors. But here's where Cordelia's desperation achieved Olympic-level stupidity. She produced sworn affidavits from residents documenting specific incidents of my threatening behavior. Names I recognized immediately: Mrs. Penelope, the Henderson family, Frank Morrison, all people actively helping me build the case against her. She'd forged their signatures on statements accusing me of the exact crimes she'd been committing: document forgery, identity theft, false witness statements. Cordelia was apparently trying to set a federal crime speed run record. Based on this overwhelming evidence, she announced with courtroom drama, I'm filing emergency protective orders and demanding immediate law enforcement intervention. Then came the mini twist that sealed her fate forever. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911 right there, in front of 60 witnesses, while my cameras captured every federal crime in real time. Emergency dispatch, I need immediate police protection from criminal judicial intimidation, she said, her voice hitting frequencies that probably confused dogs 3 neighborhoods away. Ma'am, what's the nature of the threat? Came the dispatcher's increasingly familiar voice. A corrupt retired judge is conducting psychological warfare using legal harassment and surveillance terrorism against elected community officials. The pause was so long I could hear the dispatcher's brain trying to process this latest episode of the Cordelia Show. Ma'am, are you reporting actual physical threats? This is physical. He's using judicial corruption to undermine democratic community governance. This is domestic terrorism. Another pause. Ma'am, we've received 14 complaints from your address about civil disputes. Unless someone is brandishing weapons, this belongs in civil court. Cordelia's face cycled through more colors than a broken traffic light. She slammed the phone down and whirled to face the room of increasingly horrified residents. This proves the corruption, she shrieked, spittle flying from her lips. The entire judicial system is protecting their criminal conspirator. The smell of her desperation mixed with overwhelming perfume created a toxic cloud that made people literally lean away from the podium. That's when I stood up, walked calmly to the front of the room, and delivered the line I'd been rehearsing all week. Cordelia, before you file any more false reports, maybe the community should know that your organization has been legally dead for 2 years. The look of absolute terror that flashed across her face was worth every moment of harassment, every fraudulent fine, every sleepless night. Monday morning was going to be beautiful. Monday morning felt like the Super Bowl of suburban justice. The community center buzzed with electric anticipation as residents packed every available seat, 127 people crammed into a space designed for 80, with late arrivals standing against walls like they were witnessing history. In the back corner, investigative reporter Sarah Kim positioned her camera crew with the stealth of seasoned war correspondents. The smell of stale coffee mixed with nervous energy and the faint scent of impending vindication. Cordelia made her grand entrance at exactly 9 a.m., strutting to the podium like she was accepting an Academy Award instead of walking into a federal trap. Her designer suit probably cost more than most residents' annual HOA fees. Ironic, considering those fees were stolen money. Good morning, residents of Willowbrook Estates, she announced, her voice dripping with fake authority that echoed off cinderblock walls. Today we eliminate the cancer threatening our community's safety and prosperity. She launched into a theatrical performance that would have impressed Broadway producers. Charts showing my surveillance activities, photos of my intimidation campaign, a PowerPoint presentation titled Protecting Democracy from Judicial Corruption. Some individuals believe their former positions place them above community law, she declared, pointing at me like I was personally responsible for every neighborhood problem since the invention of suburbs. But no one, not even corrupt retired judges, can terrorize your elected representatives. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Word had spread about our evidence gathering, and smart residents sensed they were about to witness something unprecedented. Before we proceed with emergency protective measures, Cordelia continued, her smile sharp enough to perform surgery, I demand this troublemaker publicly apologize for his systematic harassment of your Democratic leadership. She pointed directly at me with prosecutorial drama. Judge Sterling, stand and address the community you've been terrorizing. The moment of truth had arrived. I stood slowly, evidence folder in hand, and walked to the podium with the calm confidence of someone holding evidence that could topple governments. Before I address anything, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the packed room, the community deserves to know something critical about this organization. I held up the state dissolution documents like the Constitution itself. According to official state records, the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association died on March 15th, 2 years ago. The collective gasp sucked all oxygen from the room. Heads whipped around, voices exploded, and Cordelia's face cycled through more colors than a broken slot machine. Legally speaking, this organization has had no more authority than a book club for 24 months. Every fine collected, every violation issued, every threat made, all criminal fraud. That was my mic drop moment. The room erupted like a volcano of righteous anger. Those documents are fabricated lies, Cordelia shrieked, her voice hitting frequencies that probably cracked windows. He's manufacturing evidence to destroy legitimate governance. Anyone can verify this on the State Business Registry website, I replied calmly, while half the room was already pulling out phones to fact-check in real time. Mrs. Penelope rose like an avenging angel, her voice trembling with 2 years of suppressed fury. You stole $2,847 from my family. Money for my granddaughter's education. Sarah Henderson jumped up, tears streaming. You terrorized our children while robbing us blind. The crowd's anger reached nuclear levels. Residents were standing, shouting, demanding answers from a woman who'd systematically destroyed their peace and stolen their money. Cordelia frantically pounded her gavel like she was trying to beat it to death. This meeting is illegal. I'm calling federal authorities. The irony was perfect. Federal authorities were already here. The community center doors burst open simultaneously from 3 entrances. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded in like they were raiding a terrorist cell. IRS criminal investigation officers followed, their presence adding federal tax evasion to Cordelia's growing list of problems. The lead agent, a woman who looked like she could bench press a small car, approached the podium with handcuffs already gleaming in the fluorescent light. Cordelia Ashworth, you're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, filing false instruments, conspiracy to defraud consumers, and operating a dissolved corporation for criminal purposes. The mechanical click of handcuffs closing around Cordelia's wrists was the most beautiful sound I'd heard since my retirement party. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Cordelia's final performance was screaming about constitutional violations and federal conspiracies while being perp-walked past 127 residents, recording her downfall in high-definition glory. This is illegal persecution. I have democratic authority. You can't arrest elected officials. Ma'am, the agent replied with deadpan precision, you're an unelected criminal operating a fake organization. As federal vehicles disappeared down the street with their handcuffed cargo, the community exploded in celebration that probably registered on seismic equipment 3 counties away. Frank Morrison approached the podium, tears of relief streaming down his face. Judge Sterling, what happens to our stolen money? Full restitution with statutory interest, I announced. Every fraudulent penny returned to its rightful owners. The applause lasted until the news crews finished filming and the last federal agent left the building. A neighborhood had been liberated from a 2-year occupation by bureaucratic terrorism. The legal aftermath was swift and beautiful. Cordelia faced a 12-count federal indictment that read like a criminal law encyclopedia. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, filing false instruments, and operating a dissolved corporation for criminal enterprise. Her plea negotiations lasted exactly 1 meeting. When her attorney saw our evidence mountain, he practically begged federal prosecutors for mercy. Final sentence: 18 months federal prison, full restitution of $147,000, asset forfeiture, and lifetime ban from any HOA involvement nationwide. The money recovery felt like Christmas morning. Within 6 weeks, residents received restitution checks that transformed lives. Mrs. Penelope got back $2,847 plus interest, immediately deposited into her granddaughter's college fund. This pays for her first year studying constitutional law, Mrs. Penelope told me over jasmine tea, tears of joy glistening. She wants to protect families like ours from future Cordelias. The Henderson family used their $1,200 refund to build an elaborate backyard playground, complete with a chalk art station visible from 3 streets. Their kids went from hiding behind curtains to creating sidewalk masterpieces that celebrate childhood freedom, but the real magic was watching our community transform. We formed a legitimate HOA with proper incorporation, term limits, mandatory audits, and transparency requirements that would make government officials jealous. Frank Morrison became treasurer, his accounting background ensuring we'd never again fall victim to financial fraud. Our new bylaws include the Cordelia Clause. Any resident can demand incorporation documents, financial reports, and meeting minutes within 24 hours. Transparency isn't suggested, it's legally required. My garden became the neighborhood showpiece, with Mrs. Penelope teaching me traditional growing techniques while Henderson kids contributed artwork and infectious enthusiasm. The sweet smell of ripening tomatoes mixed with children's laughter replaced the old atmosphere of fear and clipboard terrorism. The media attention sparked a movement. Our story went viral, inspiring investigations in 17 communities across 3 states. Turns out, fake HOA scams were epidemic nationwide. I was invited to speak at municipal law conferences, and my guide, How to Verify Your HOA's Legal Authority, has been downloaded over 50,000 times. State legislators passed the HOA Transparency and Accountability Act unanimously, requiring all homeowner associations to maintain public websites with current incorporation status and financial reports. Any HOA that can't produce documentation faces automatic state investigation. 6 months post-arrest, we established the Willowbrook Educational Justice Fund, using excess recovered money. The fund provides scholarships for students studying law, community advocacy, or consumer protection. Our first recipients, Mrs. Penelope's granddaughter, planning to study civil rights law focusing on housing discrimination, and the Henderson's daughter, who wants to become a community organizer protecting elderly residents from fraud. The annual Willowbrook Diversity Festival became our signature celebration. Families share traditional foods, children create multicultural sidewalk murals, and nobody measures anything with clipboards. The aroma of dozens of cultural dishes mixing with flower gardens and genuine community joy replaced the old reign of terror. As I write this, my tomatoes are softball-sized, my sprinklers run exactly when I choose, and no one has timed my irrigation in 8 months. Mrs. Penelope's granddaughter stops by after school to help garden and practice legal arguments on someone who appreciates constitutional analysis. Retirement finally became what I'd dreamed. Peaceful mornings with coffee and actual vegetables, afternoon conversations with neighbors who feel safe in their homes, and evenings filled with children playing without fear. Sometimes the best justice isn't just stopping bad actors, it's building something beautiful from the wreckage they leave behind. Our neighborhood went from a dictatorship disguised as democracy to an actual community where families thrive, children play freely, and elderly residents are respected rather than targeted. The textured feel of garden soil between my fingers, mixed with the sound of neighborhood kids playing games instead of hiding indoors, reminds me daily that small acts of courage can transform entire communities. Cordelia tried to break our spirits with fake authority and stolen money. Instead, she accidentally created a neighborhood full of people who understand their rights, value transparency, and protect each other from those who abuse power. What's your worst HOA nightmare story? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and some might become future episodes. If you enjoyed watching Cordelia get her comeuppance, you'll love next week's story about the contractor who thought he could scam a decorated Marine veteran. Spoiler alert, he seriously underestimated his target. Hit subscribe on HOA Stories and ring that notification bell for more tales of everyday heroes taking down neighborhood tyrants.
That's a wrap for today's episode on HOA Stories. If you enjoyed watching Karma in action, smash that like button, comment your thoughts, and let us know if you've dealt with HOA madness too. Subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA meltdown we post.